left to run their generators. Israel's war on Gaza has killed at least 2,000. Vanier, it's good to have you with us. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, the U.S. is evacuating its citizens from Israel by ship, but they say space is limited and it's first come, first served. The U.S. Secretary of State's diplomacy tour through the Middle East continues. Anthony Blinken stresses the need to prevent the conflict from spreading further. And Iran's foreign minister tells Al Jazeera Tehran will not remain an observer in the war if Israel continues its attacks. The specter of death is hanging over Gaza. That's the message from the UN aid chief, Martin Griffiths. Hospitals across Gaza have only 24 hours of fuel left to run their generators. Israel's war on Gaza has killed at least 2,750 Palestinians since last Saturday. In 9 days, more than 1,000 Palestinian children have been killed, and more than 1,000 people are believed to be under the rubble. Residents say the stench of death hangs thick in their destroyed neighborhoods. 1,400 Israelis have been killed in Hamas's ongoing military operation, and that includes 293 soldiers. The combined number of casualties on both sides makes this already the deadliest conflict so far. This war has uprooted more than 1 million Palestinians from their homes following Israel's relentless bombardment and evacuation order. And now water has run out of UN shelters across Gaza, where tens of thousands of people are sheltering. There are reports that the Egyptian-controlled Rafah crossing would reopen on Monday. Hundreds of Palestinians with foreign passports have been waiting at the border to evacuate out of Gaza. And aid from several countries has been held up in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula for days, waiting to get into the enclave. Those people spent the night under Israel's heaviest bombardment of the Gaza Strip since the war began last week. Imogen Kimber reports.
The aftermath of another Israeli strike on Gaza. The bombardment hitting homes and buildings where people are taking refuge. And the dead from the destruction. Palestinian authorities say more than 1,000 people across the Strip are missing under the rubble. Tens of thousands are taking shelter at schools run by the UN Refugee Agency.
We escaped. We are scared. Shelling is everywhere. The world must understand our situation. We have children and we have sick people. Also, they're displaced people who are suffering from cancer. We are terrorized.
They have destroyed my house. I have no other place to live. I don't know where to go. They told us to go to the south. And here we are in the south. I'm sick and tired of everything. I don't need food. I just need to go back to my house. Take me to my place and I will live in a tent there.
Hospitals and clinics are at breaking point. Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, is overcrowded with people who have fled their homes, or what's left of them.
The burden on the health sector is so huge, and large numbers of people are taking shelter here and in schools in total disorder, with no hygiene. It will cause epidemics across Gaza and beyond. Their health situation is extremely dangerous.
Compounding the problem is Israel's blockade. It's cut essential supplies of food and fuel, and water has run out in UN shelters.
Even if the water is restored, the water is going to go to big containers in Gaza, which means that the water will need to be trucked to different locations. And to truck the water to different locations, we need fuel for the trucks. So it's really a chain of events that need to happen before people can actually get water.
And with no electricity, night brings almost complete darkness to Gaza and a fear of what may come next. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera correspondent Yumna El-Sayed is in southern Gaza in Khan Yunis for us. Yumna, it's good to talk to you. Describe what's happening where you are.
Well, now about 5 ambulances just arrived to the hospital with injuries and a number of people killed. And honestly, the injuries were really, really bad. Children and women and men. their injuries were very, very extremely bad. The two children, they had really bad injuries in the head, and these were of the bombardment of their home right here in Khan Yunis, where their home was bombarded while they were inside the home. So the civil defense teams are still trying to get people out of that bombardment of that home, but these were the people that they were able to bring them to hospital. So as people, thousands of people were evacuated from Gaza City and the northern Gaza Strip to the south, as the Israeli military asked them to do, the bombardment in Khan Yunis and in Rafah, the southern areas, have not stopped. They have been ongoing. They have been very violent. Homes are still being targeted and bombarded over the heads of the civilians, and the situation in the hospitals remains to be extremely deteriorating, while hospitals are saying that this is the last 24 hours that they can operate with the fuel left in the external generators that they have been working on the past few days.
And right now, Yumna, right now, does the hospital have the capacity to treat the new wounded and patients that are being brought in?
The hospitals have white tents that are everywhere in the premises of the yards of the hospitals. They have lost their capacity inside the premises of the hospital a long time ago, days ago. These tents now are external tents for morgues, for now as departments for children and for those injuries that are still coming on. The injuries have not stopped every hour, while the capacity of the hospital has completely run out. So they're now depending on these tents that they have adjusted outside the hospital premises in different areas in the yards of the hospital, while the yards are completely also filled with people who have come here to take refuge in the hospital, considering that this might be the only relatively safe place for them to stay at.
Yumna, I heard what may have been, what sounded like continued bombardment behind you. I might be mistaken. What did you hear?
Yes, there are still airstrikes going on around the premises of the hospital here in Khan Yunis. These injuries that were just brought, that it was just a targeting of a home that was very close here to the hospital. The bombardments are still going on in the area of Khan Yunis where the hospital is, and the targeting and the bombardments are still in different areas as well. Beni Shela, which is just before Khan Yunis, it's in the central part of Gaza, or considering the beginning of Khan Yunis. There was also a family home that was pounded over the civilians in it, and ambulances have rushed to that area now to get those who have been crashed or bombarded under that home bombardment.
Aljazeera's Yumna Sayed, thank you very much. Just want to recap what Yumna told us. It's important information at this hour that you hear there is continued bombardment in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Now, why is this important? Because Israel, over the last 48 hours, 3 days, has been asking Palestinians to leave the northern part of the Strip, go to the southern part of the Strip. Now, we just had moments ago confirmation there are continued bombardments in the southern part of the Strip. Also, about 2 hours ago, Reuters news agency was reporting, citing Egyptian sources, that there might be a ceasefire in the southern part of the Strip. Clearly, that is not happening. It was denied also by Hamas and the Israeli prime minister. The bombardment continues. Let's get the situation from southern Israel. Charles Stratford joins us from Sderot. Charles, what can you tell us on your end?
Well, yeah, you join us on the western outskirts of Sderot. I'll step out of the frame and show you what we're looking at here. What you can see through the gap in those trees is the Gaza neighborhood of Beit Hanun. It sits on the top northeast corner of the Gaza Strip, and you'll be able to pick out the destroyed buildings there. Evidence of the severity of these airstrikes, artillery strikes from the Israelis over the last few days. We do not know how many people are still there, but we do know that obviously this area of Gaza is the area that the Israelis are saying that civilians should move from. They should move south, so basically from the right to left of viewers' TV screens. Now, that neighbourhood was completely rebuilt after it was smashed to pieces in the last war, 2014, and it's a similar scenario in various other neighbourhoods and areas of Gaza, obviously since this crisis has started. Since we've been here, we've seen a couple of strikes in that area, plumes of black smoke rising, but it has been, so far this morning, as I say, in the last couple of hours since we've been here, relatively quiet. In terms of Palestinian missiles being fired into Israel, we've had reports, confirmed reports now of at least a couple of barrages, one in the direction of the town of Nahal Oz. That's close to the border. It was one of the towns or villages that was infiltrated by Hamas fighters on October the 7th, and many Israelis killed there. Another missile in the direction of the town of Be'eri, again pretty close to Nahal Oz and where we are here. We're hearing reports of at least one casualty in those attacks. But as I say, it has been, certainly in this area, relatively quiet. In terms of civilians still living in towns like Sderot, that's despite those evacuation efforts being made by the local authorities and the military over the last couple of days. There's still a lot of people in this town who are not moving. They're prepared to stay. We spoke to one couple earlier today, and they said they were even contemplating moving back. So for the time being, the situation here remains manageable for the civilians living in this area, but of course that could change at any moment.
Charles, I wonder what you might be able to tell us on Israel's specific military goals and plans moving forward. And I understand that they haven't all obviously been disclosed to the public. But yesterday, the U.S. President Joe Biden said it would be a bad idea for Israel to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. And what we're hearing from within Israel is also that they don't want to reoccupy that piece of land. They moved out, disengaged from there more than 15 years ago. So apart from the headline objective that Israel has said to cripple Hamas, do we know what that actually looks like? Do we have any more specificity on their objectives?
Let me ask Marino to move in and zoom in on that neighbourhood again, and that will give you some idea of the kind of challenges that the Israeli military will be facing. As you can see, it is a neighbourhood that has, a lot of buildings. There are big fears about Israeli losses because it's going to be very difficult, potentially urban warfare. We know that Hamas has had years to dig in. We know that a lot of their military infrastructure has already been destroyed, according to the Israelis. Some of the tunnels, many of the tunnels, so the Israeli army is claiming have been hit. But the sheer the density of buildings in areas like Beit Hanun would suggest that any kind of movement from the ground, at least, on the ground at least, would be very difficult for any army, no matter their capabilities. So we also know that, the Israeli military is saying that this is going to be a combined air, land and sea operation. And it's not obviously going to be just from here, from this area moving into the Gaza. It's going to be, we understand, right the way along the Gaza Strip. So the challenges are immense, and I don't think that that is wasted or lost on the military leadership in this country, nor the politicians. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how they get on. But yeah, their big objective, so they keep saying, is the crippling of Hamas. And it was very interesting yesterday speaking to local people here who were getting on those buses to be evacuated. One of them told us he didn't believe ever that Hamas could be toppled by the Israeli government, no matter the strength of their military might.
Aljazeera's Charles Stratford reporting from Sderot, just a few kilometers away from the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Thank you very much, Charles. A U.S. ship is set to evacuate Americans from Israel to Cyprus. U.S. authorities have not disclosed how many people will be aboard the vessel, but say that space is limited and boarding will proceed in order of arrival. Tens of thousands of U.S. passport holders currently live in Israel, and since the war began, 29 U.S. nationals have been confirmed dead, and another 15 are still missing. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is returning to Israel on Monday. His visit comes as the U.S. President Joe Biden said it would be, as we mentioned, a big mistake for Israel to occupy the Gaza Strip. Iran's foreign minister has also been vocal. Mike Hanna reports from Washington, D.C.
The initial U.S. response to the Hamas attack 10 days ago was immediate condemnation. But absent was the call for Israeli restraint that in the past would be part of U.S. reaction. Over the past 24 hours, as the U.S. Secretary of State shuttled through the region, there's been an apparent shift in the U.S. position. President Biden now advising Israel against any reoccupation of Gaza.
What happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But to going in and taking out the extremists, the Hezbollah is up north, but Hamas down south is a necessary requirement.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do. But there needs to be a Palestinian Authority. There needs to be a path to a Palestinian state.
We work together to make sure that, to the best of our ability, this conflict does not spread.
A possible reason for the U.S. shift may be a consequence of Antony Blinken's discussions. In his meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Arab anger at Israeli action was made public.
This is a huge crisis, and I'm concerned that the Israeli reaction exceeded the right to self-defense and turned into a collective punishment of the Gaza Strip, which has 2.3 million Palestinians.
In Doha, the Iranian foreign minister met the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, who maintains relations with all parties to the conflict. In an interview with Aljazeera, Iran's top diplomat said his country will not remain a bystander if Israel continues attacking Gaza.
If the measures aiming at immediately stopping the Israeli occupations attacks that are killing children in the Palestinian territories, namely in the Gaza Strip and in the deadlock, it is highly probable that many other fronts will be opened. This option is not ruled out, and this is becoming increasingly more probable.
The Biden administration appears increasingly concerned about a wider war. A recommitment to a two-state solution, along with increasing efforts in humanitarian relief, may be part of a strategy to reassure Arab allies that the U.S. can be a fair broker in the conflict. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Alan Fisher is in West Jerusalem. Alan, Blinken was in Israel, then toured the Middle East, and now is coming back to Israel. Why is he coming back?
Well, there'll be the usual diplomatic language, but we can read between the lines and suggest that he's probably gained the temperature of what's happening in the Arab world through his visit with 7 other Arab leaders, and then coming back to speak to the Israelis about a number of things. One is he'll express the concern that whatever the Israelis tend to do in Gaza, that they limit the humanitarian impact of that. Secondly, he would like to see a humanitarian corridor opened up between southern Gaza and Egypt through the Rafah crossing. He would like the Rafah crossing opened to make sure that those who have dual nationality can actually leave Gaza into Egypt at the moment. Now, but just in the last couple of hours, the Prime Minister's office has put out a statement saying there will be no ceasefire in southern Gaza, so that would seem to rule out that idea. There's the question, too, of the invite to Joe Biden. Of course, in just the last few hours, he said that Israel should not reconsider should consider reoccupying the Gaza Strip. Now, if Joe Biden is here when there are Israeli forces on the ground there, that could be embarrassing for the American president, who's been pretty steadfast in his support for Israel over the last week or so. So there's a lot of boxes for Antony Blinken to tick, including trying to find out exactly where the Israelis are when it comes to the negotiation of relieving people who've been taken into Gaza after the events last Saturday, particularly those who could claim American citizenship, because that is obviously a crisis that Antony Blinken and the Biden White House would like to avoid.
Alan, something else that the U.S.'s top diplomat is presumably involved in is continuing evacuations of U.S. nationals or dual nationals from the north of Israel.
Well, certainly what we know is just in the last hour, the Israeli army has announced that they are evacuating around 28 communities that are close to the border with Lebanon and saying that they have to get out. There have been a number of tit-for-tat exchanges between Hezbollah and the Israeli army over the last 6-7 days. None of them have been widespread, but they've enough to cause concern among the Israeli army. So they're announcing that 28 communities will be evacuated. That's essentially a buffer zone between the Lebanese border and 2 kilometres inside the country. There's also going to be a further buffer zone of another 2 kilometres. Essentially, no one's going to be allowed to enter that. It will become a military zone. Moving all these people is going to take some time. They'll be housed in government-paid-for guest houses, but that operation is going to get underway in the next couple of hours. People essentially just told, pack up what you need for a few days. You're leaving because of this ongoing exchange between Hezbollah and the Israeli army. And that builds in to what Antony Blinken is saying, because the Americans are very keen not to see the exchanges that are happening in Gaza spread and this become a much wider conflict.
Alan Fisher reporting from West Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Well, you're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our headlines this hour. If you're just joining us, here's all right, the number of Israelis that have been killed so far since the beginning of the conflict, 1,400 Israelis. Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 2,750 Palestinians since last Saturday. That includes more than 1,000 children. Israel has killed more Palestinians in 8 days than its forces did in 51 days of war on Gaza in 2014. The number of Israelis killed in Hamas's military operation, as I just told you, now stands at 1,400, including 293 soldiers. The conflict has forced more than 1 million Palestinians from their homes in just 9 days. Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has called for Israel to immediately stop its aggression against the Palestinian people. That message came in a phone call with his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro. Abbas said that the policies, programs, and decisions of the Palestine Liberation Organization are what represent the Palestinian people as the sole legitimate representative and not the policies of any other organization. All right, Huda Abdelhamid is in Ramallah. Huda, we'll get to that, and that matters. You'll explain to us why the intra-Palestinian rivalry between Fatah and Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas and the Hamas leaders. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. First, though, I'd like you to tell us what's happening on the ground in the occupied West Bank, where there have been more raids and more arrests.
Well, Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are under immense pressure by the Israeli forces that basically control every aspect of their lives, their movement from one city to the other. And at the moment, they're being closely monitored. They've been nightly raids ever since, for a long time already there've been raids, but the number of raids has increased dramatically ever since this crisis started. Just last night there were dozens of raids all over the occupied West Bank. Some of them lasted until just an hour ago south of Jericho. 70 people got arrested. What happens is that most of these people get arrested under administrative detention, which means that only Israel knows why they are being detained, and Israel does not need to give these or explain these charges to the detainee or the lawyer. We have spoken to some families here in the Ramallah area, and this is our report.
It was 6:30 in the morning, and the narrow alleys of El Amari refugee camp were still quiet. Israeli soldiers lined up and made their way to the home of Samer Bedra. His family was jolted out of bed when they kicked open the front door. They were after Samer's 2 eldest sons.
فأمسك براء نزل فيه ضرب I asked why they were doing this, and they said we're at war. When I asked if I could give my sons their jackets, because it's cold outside, the officer in charge told me, your children shouldn't be alive.
This is the moment they were led away. The family doesn't know where they were taken to. More than 60 Palestinians were detained in less than 12 hours across the occupied West Bank. This video, filmed by a soldier, shows him taunting the young man taken away.
The number of daily detentions has tripled over the past week. That's according to the Palestinian Prisoners Society. But there's also another concern that those already held in Israeli jails are coming under duress.
By law, Israel is obliged to respond to lawyers who ask about the whereabouts of a detainee. That hasn't happened since the outbreak of this war, according to Hamoked, an Israeli human rights group.
Usually we are receiving 100 phone calls a week. Now we are receiving 100 phone calls a day. We have written urgently to Israel's Attorney General to say, you cannot deny prisoners access to their lawyers. There are reports, but we cannot confirm about violence, about some punishments.
When Sima Hamad last spoke to her husband, he told her that things have changed inside the jail ever since Hamas's attack on Israel.
He told me that this could be the last time we speak for a while. He said that the prison authority has imposed punishments on them, confiscating belongings. Water is available for an hour per day. Electricity is cut off during the day.
Her husband has been held for more than a year without charges. It's not the first time. Her young son has only seen his father for 3 months during his 3 years of life. As Israel prepares for a possible ground offensive in Gaza, Palestinians elsewhere fear its effects will increasingly impact them. Huda Abdelhamid, Aljazeera, Ramallah.
Okay, Huda, back to you. We mentioned earlier those comments by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. I need you to walk us through them, walk our viewers through them, because we need to remember in the midst of all of this, yes, Israel is at war in Gaza, but there's this bitter rivalry, has been for a decade plus, between Mahmoud Abbas, Palestinian Authority President, and the Hamas.
Yes, absolutely. And then when it comes to Gaza, I mean, the authority there is Hamas. There was a bitter fight between Fatah and Hamas back in 2007, but Hamas managed to impose itself. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has been absent more than present ever since this crisis started. He has not appeared publicly. He has not addressed the Palestinian people. All the statements we hear from him are through the official news agency Wafa, and most of them are basically an account of his phone conversations with a foreign leader, be it President Joe Biden or lately Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And I just want to tell you about one account that might explain the whole situation very well. When that report first came out last night, he was quoted as saying that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people, and only the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, is the sole representative of the Palestinian people and their aspiration. Then came a second news account which omitted the word Hamas, and that was probably very indicative of the kind of pressure he's under.
Huda Abdelhamid reporting from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thank you very much, Huda.